Hello, this is Diane Hinchcliffe from Web 2.0 Expo San Francisco 2009, and we have with us Simon Wardley, who's the Software Services Manager of Canonical and is doing some very interesting things around cloud computing. Welcome.
Thank you, Diane.
So tell us a little bit about some of the things you guys are doing in cloud computing. I heard some open source, some eucalyptus, and other interesting things as we were talking right before we were taping here.
Absolutely. So one of the things about cloud computing, lots and lots of benefits associated with cloud computing, whether it's economies of scale, volume operations, utility charging, pay-per-use, componentization, faster speed to market, focus on core activities, outsourcing. So it has a lot of promise for the future. But one of the things, there are lots of risks seen to be associated with it. One is the risk of doing nothing, because losing out on all those benefits with your competitors. Another is the transitional types of risks, because it's a new industry forming, so trust in vendors and so forth. Another is the general outsourcing risks associated with the outsourcing of any activity. Is it suitable?
Absolutely.
Is it suitable? Second sourcing options, pricing competition, so forth. So one of the things we thought was really needed, if you look at the story of networks and how we had all the different types of networks and then stabilization around TCP/IP backed by open source systems, an explosion of innovation as a result of standardization, the internet and so forth, is we thought we needed something like that to occur at the infrastructure layer of the computing stack. So we looked around and thought, well, what is the emerging standard for cloud computing? And the emerging standard for cloud computing is Amazon EC2.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So what we wanted to do was provide a way for our users to experiment with the cloud in the concepts of cloud and self-service IT, which you've talked about many times in the past, as a transitional path to moving outside of the firewall to many different providers, or providers such as Amazon.
So essentially, people who are doing this, they can use cloud technology safely in their own sandbox and get used to using it and applying it and building with it. And then when they're comfortable with it, they can start moving it outside.
Absolutely. So what we're doing in the Ubuntu distribution in 9.04 is releasing a system called Eucalyptus, totally open source technology, which will enable
That's an open source cloud computing stack, I believe, right?
Absolutely. And that will enable you to build your own clouds which match the Amazon EC2 API. So you can test, experiment, and deploy internally behind the firewall, get used to the concepts of cloud computing, and use it internally in the safety, as people say it, of behind the firewall, as a route to getting comfortable with this, so that when you need to move outside, when you need to take those advantages of economies of scale and so forth, that you're actually, the path to moving outside to the public providers of cloud service is much smaller.
So it strikes me that one of the advantages of cloud computing is this economy of scale, that a provider is going to have so much bandwidth and so much hardware and all the infrastructure required for it, that the incremental cost is very, very low for people who want to adopt it. But it also seems like it's the return of the commercial software platform wars, where you have this, worry about lock-in. I hear a lot about that. And Eucalyptus is great, and it sounds like what you guys are putting together with the Ubuntu distribution will help. But how do you guys then achieve the economies of scale?
Okay, well, I'll deal with the latter problem first. Okay, so the question about locking. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about interoperability in the cloud computing space. And the reality is that if you have multiple different platforms, and I'll take the platform layer of the computing stack, you have multiple different platforms. The idea that your data and application will run in something like Google App Engine and somehow you'll magically transform it and it'll run in Azure, I think is
a little naive.
I think it's a little naive. The way to solve the problem, and it goes back to the example of the electricity industry, is you need standard outputs. So what you need is multiple different providers of the same standard. So if you have like Google App Engine, you need multiple different providers of Google App Engine. Now that doesn't give you portability, that's just a stepping stone towards portability, but it makes the problem a lot easier. Now, if that standard is actually owned by somebody, so it's somebody they own the technology around that standard.
It's like a de facto standard is what we're really saying, I think.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So very good point. First, it's de facto standards. It's not going to come from committees sitting around. It is going to come from market choice. But if that standard is owned by one particular company and everybody adopts it, then that particular vendor actually owns that marketplace, so that they can set the direction of where that marketplace is going. Now, that may be okay for a lot of people. But we actually believe that what you need is the standards to be based on open source reference models. So nobody, whether it's ISVs, customers, or so forth, are locked into a particular technology vendor's choice and their future direction, that there is freedom in the market. But on top of that, it doesn't prevent people competing in that market, i.e. providing the service with proprietary code, because all it has to do is match whatever the standard is. So you get the benefits of freedom, you get the benefits of choice, and you get the benefits of competition. Now, we're starting at the infrastructure layer. So that's why we chose what we thought was the de facto standard, and it obviously is the de facto standard for cloud, EC2 API, and we've picked up an open source system which re-implements that, and we're adding that into the distribution. Now, when it comes to economies of scale, just because you get portability between different environments doesn't solve, you're going to get competition on price and quality of service, and you're going to get people who are very good at volume operations, and Amazon is an example of somebody who is extremely good at volume operations. You'll probably also get niche providers in the future who will specialize for certain types of areas, certain types of industries.
I feel like even Rackspace getting into cloud computing.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
So it's likely that if we start to get standards, de facto standards, based upon open source reference models, we're going to get competition between different providers based upon price and quality of services aimed for different markets.
Yeah.
Some of these providers will be huge, some of these providers will be fairly niche.
Fantastic.
Now, internally, of course, your economies of scale, it depends. It depends on how big you want to make your own cloud. I mean, if you go into a lot of organizations, a lot of large organizations, they have enormous amounts of computer resources, which are barely used.
Exactly. 8%, as little as 8%, I've heard it.
Well, I heard 15, but 8 could well be the figure. I mean, either way, it's a very, very small percentage of resources which is effectively being used. So there is always economies of scale there.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Well, Simon, thank you for coming on the show. Can I just ask you real quick, if someone wants to get started with your cloud computing stack, how do they go about doing that?
Well, the technology preview comes out in the Ubuntu distribution in 9.04, so it's at the end of April.
And just part of Ubuntu?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.